In the previous lectures, we have talked about fundamentals of project management, if you remember. And then we have talked about initiation and what are the things involved in the process of initiation. Today we are going to enter to the chapter of planning. Okay. But before we start the chapter of the planning, this is just to confirm for you that I have already posted a post regarding your test, which is going to be on the next Sunday. Okay, so your test is going to be the next Sunday. Just okay, so it's going to be next Sunday, 25th, and it's going to be from 10:15 to 10:45. Okay, that's for section number 1. Whatever we are going to finish today and the upcoming lecture is going to be included for test number 1. Okay. Once again, whatever we have finished previously, whatever we are finishing today, and whatever we are going to finish after tomorrow is going to be included in your test number 1. Test number 1 is going to be for 15 marks. 12 of the 15 marks are going to be for multiple choice questions, and then 2 short answer questions. They can be numerical, they can be explanation. Any 2 questions will be coming to you. Okay.
حتى الكلاس القادم.
Yes, of course.
عليك انت مستر.
Okay, so 15. Yeah, a lot of information. So total of 15 marks. Okay. And according to the guidelines that we have received from the department, that you are requested to open your cameras as well on the time of the exam to verify whether you are cheating or not. So the decision of opening the camera is not from my side, it is from the department side. Okay. Now we are going to start directly. Okay, we are going to start directly with the planning. And then in the planning we have different things. If you remember, these are going to be representing for you the knowledge areas. If you remember the knowledge areas, do you remember the knowledge areas? Stakeholder management, risk management, procurement management, school management, resources management. Do you remember these? The knowledge areas, the areas that we are going to, or the areas that we need to know in order to work in the field of project management. Okay, so we are going to learn how to do the planning, how to do the first step in that particular area. Okay, so we have stakeholder analysis, task planning, procurement planning, and then scope, resources, schedule planning, post planning, quality planning. If we manage to finish the first 4, then I'll be stopping that for the test. Okay, if we finish stakeholder analysis, risk planning, procurement planning, and then scope planning, this lecture or this lecture and half of the other lecture, then we are going to stop to that point for the content of your test number 2. Okay. Now, when we talk about stakeholder analysis, now you remember that we said for each and every project there will be different stakeholders, and we defined already, or we said stakeholders are people who are affecting my project, and they can be affected by my project as well. Okay, so they can affect, and then they can get affected by my project, whether it's positively or negatively as well. So our task is to try to identify and analyze the possible stakeholders for the construction of a villa. So we are taking one project in which we are trying to identify who are the possible stakeholders, and then we'll carry out the stakeholder analysis. We'll see which stakeholder is more important, which stakeholder is not that important, and what to do exactly with these stakeholders. So first step is whatever we call it as stakeholder identification. We should know who are the possible stakeholders. Now, from where we'll know the stakeholders, from where you will be knowing the stakeholders, how would you try to identify? From where you will know, who are the possible stakeholders. For the construction of a villa, from where you will know who are the possible stakeholders. We can go and ask the experts, those who are experts in the construction field. They can tell us who are the possible stakeholders. We can do brainstorming. We can sit together and think who can affect my project and who will be affected by my project. Okay. Yeah, Reem, whatever you have said is more or less referring to experts. Surveys as well. Okay. Surveys can be used as a method of collecting who are the possible stakeholders. Are we clear? So normally we ask people who have worked in the industry. That's whatever we call it, experts. Or we do brainstorming. We sit together, the project team, and we try to identify who are the possible stakeholders, or by doing surveys as well in certain scenarios. Now, the first two are mainly used for construction. Experts and brainstorming are mainly used for construction. Are we okay that these are the methods to be used to find out the possible stakeholders? Are we okay? Okay. So of course, first we'll ask somebody who is having more experience. If we couldn't manage, we'll start doing a brainstorming. If we couldn't manage, then we'll go for surveys. Now, there are different individuals. There are different individuals who are being the stakeholders over there. So, for example, we have an architect, we have a civil engineer, we have a mechanical engineers, and then we have a mason. And for example, here we have a person who is working as an HSC engineer. So different people we have tried to identify. Different people we have tried to identify as these are representing your project team now. Okay. These are representing your project team. Civil engineer, an architect, mechanical engineers, mason, the person who is doing masonry, and then an HSC engineer. Now, are they able to what you call? Are they able to affect your project or get affected by your project? Do they affect your project? Can they be affected by anything happens in the project? Do you agree with me that these are stakeholders? Okay. They are representing stakeholders where they can affect my project or they can be affected by my project. How much they can affect and how much they can get affected, we'll see it later. But first thing, I should know who are the possible stakeholders. The other one is the owner. Okay? The other one is the owner. So we have the project team, we have the owner, we have suppliers, and we have neighbors. Okay? So project team, owner, suppliers, neighbors, and then we have finally Muscat municipality, for example. Are we clear that these are individuals who are affecting my affecting my project, or they can get affected by my project? Do you agree with me? Okay, so once again, We said our project is construction of a villa. So for construction of a villa, I should know who are the possible stakeholders. So the first possible stakeholder is going to be me, the owner. The other stakeholder is going to be the consultant. Consultant is the person who is doing the drawing, so which is represented here by the architect. Okay. And then we have the people who are going to build. These are represented by the civil engineer, mechanical engineer, mason, and then we have other team members like the HSE engineer. We have people who are delivering for me the materials, whatever we call it as suppliers. Now, of course, if the supplier didn't supply me the required materials in the correct time, of course, the project will be affected. So these are acting as a stakeholder. Neighbors as well. Neighbors can create for you an issue. Because of the neighbor, we cannot construct, or we cannot keep on keep on continuing to construct in the evening times because we have neighbors around us. Okay, so neighbors are affecting the project in certain manner. And then we have Muscat municipality, where it's the approving body. It's the entity which approves my drawing, which is coming to check whether the works are okay or they are not, which needs to be repeated later on. Okay. So all of these are representing people who either affect my project or either can be affected by my project. Now the next step, after we identify the stakeholders, after we know who are the possible stakeholders, we go to a step called stakeholder analysis. Now in real project, there will be many stakeholders. Okay, there will be many stakeholders, but I should know who are, which stakeholders are more important than the other ones. Like for me, the owner is very important when, as a project manager, when I try to identify the stakeholders. Owner is very important. Sponsors are very important because if we lost these two, for example, almost we have lost the whole project. So it comes to a process where we need to evaluate which stakeholder is more important than the other stakeholder. So we need to take care of them more than the others. Okay. We have whatever we said. We have project team, we have owner, we have supplier, Muscat municipality, and then we have neighbors. These are the identified. These are the previously identified stakeholders. Now, of course, you can break up the project team to the different participants, like civil engineer, architect, and whatever, or you can write them directly as project team. Now, in order for me to say whether they are important or they are not that important, we need to classify them into two things. Okay, or we need to classify them depending on two things. One is whatever we call it power. Power is referring to a person who can stop my project. So a person or an entity who can affect my project. If he can affect my project, it means that he is having certain power. If he is affected by the project, it means that he will have some interest. Power, it means that the person is so important that he can affect my project by any means. Interest, if anything happens in the project, he will be affected as well. So he should be interested about the project. Are we clear regarding the power and interest? Are we clear about the power and interest? Okay. Now let's keep it simple. Okay, let's keep it simple. Power, if we talk about power, it refers to the entity who can stop my project at any time. Okay? An entity which can stop my project at any time. Now, can the project team stop my project at any time they want to? Can my project team stop working at any time, whatever they want? Once again, can the project team stop working whenever they want to stop working, or they don't have the power to stop? Okay. Are they replaceable? Can you once again, can they have the power to stop whenever they want? We said the answer is no. Are they replaceable? Can we change somebody to another person? If they are replaceable and then they cannot stop the work at any time, it means that they don't have the power. They don't have the power. Are you okay? Once again, if they cannot stop your project at any time they want to, and they are replaceable, means you can change them by somebody else, it means that they don't have the power. Is it clear? Are we clear? Okay. Now, what about the owner? Does he have the power, the owner? Do you think the owner can stop the project at any time? Can you replace the owner? Can you replace the owner? No, the owner cannot be replaced, right? And then he can stop the project whenever he wants. So the owner is a person who is having a power. Do you agree with me that he is a person who is having the power? Okay. So the owner, we say, the person who is having the power. What about supplier? The supplier can stop my project at any time. Is he replaceable or not? Is he replaceable? First question I should ask myself, can he stop the project? If he stopped the project, can I go to somebody else to do the work for me? Is he replaceable? If he is replaceable, then he does not have the power. Can you replace the supplier by another supplier? Or he is just the only supplier in the country? If you can replace him, it means that he does not have the power. If we cannot replace, or if we can replace him, then he does not have the power. Okay, so the supplier in this scenario, the supplier does not have the power as well. The supplier does not have the power. What about Muscat municipality? Yeah, we are not talking now about the delays or not, or what happened to the coast. Right now, we are checking who are more important or not. Okay, Muscat municipality. Muscat municipality, can you replace them? If they see that there is something wrong with the project, can they stop the project? So can we say Muscat municipality is can we say Muscat municipality is having the power? Muscat municipality is having the power. Okay. What about neighbors? Can they stop your project, your neighbors? Can the neighbors stop your project? No, they cannot stop my project. Okay, they cannot stop my project. So it means that directly they don't have the power. Okay. So once again, the first question that I should ask myself, can they stop the project? If they can, in certain scenario, I'll be asking myself the other question: are they replaceable or they are not replaceable? If the first question says they cannot stop the project, it means that they don't have the power. If they are replaceable, it means that they don't have the power either. Are we okay? Are we fine? Is it clear? Okay, so you should ask yourself two questions. Once again, are they able to stop me? Are they replaceable or not? So when we talk about the power, we talk about whether they will be affecting me. Okay, are they able to affect me? Okay, now going for the second point, which is interest. Interest, whether they can be affected by the project or not. Okay, they can be affected by the project or not. Now, if anything goes wrong in the project, will they be affected? Will the project team be affected if anything goes wrong in the project? Let's say if the scenario of this lockdown and coronavirus and whatever, coronavirus lockdown, and then the project has been stopped. Okay, the project has been stopped. Will the project team be affected? The project team are affected, of course, because the project has been stopped. Okay, so can I say that they have the interest? Do they care a lot about what happens with this particular project? Yes, they are having the interest. Okay, they are having the interest. What about the owner? What about the owner? If the project stopped, will he be affected? Of course, if my project has been stopped, I'll be affected. Okay. Supplier, if most of your project has been stopped, will you be affected as supplier? Okay. So we say project team are having interest, owner is having interest, supplier is having interest. Now going to Muscat municipality. Will Muscat municipality be affected if your project has been stopped? Now Muscat municipality is having a lot of projects. So your project is not more special than the other projects which are available. Okay. True that they have the power, but they don't have a lot of interest in your project. Your project is like any other project available in Muscat. Are we clear? Okay. Now what about neighbors? Will they be affected directly? Will they be affected directly by anything happens in the project? Okay. Now when it comes to the neighbors, normally there is what you call, the answers are debatable. That depends. Okay, that depends between or that depends on the scenario between the neighbors and then the project. But normally the neighbors are not having that interest in your project. You are to them like any other neighbor who is building near to them. Okay. So if we go and see, you will see that the project team is having interest, but they don't have power, as we said. So we place them in this particular area where you can see here we have this is called power versus interest matrix. Power versus interest matrix. Here you can see that we have two zones for power. One is low power, and then the other one is a high power. In interest as well, we have two regions. One is called to be low interest, and the other one is high interest. So you can see here for the project team, they have high interest, but they don't have power. It means that their power is low. It means that they will be in the category of low power but high interest. Are we clear? So this one is low power, low interest. This is low interest with high power. This one is high power, high interest. And this is low power, high interest. Are we clear? Are we fine, or shall I repeat? Okay. Now when we go and see here, okay. When we go and see here, we have for power, we have two categories. You can see two lines are there, two regions are there. The bottom one is low power. The bottom one is low power. The top one is high power. Okay, low power, high power. For interest, low interest, high interest. Left is low interest, right is high interest. Now, if they are here, if they are in this region, they represent what? They represent, of course, a low power, and they represent low interest. Are we clear? If we go in this region, you will see they are representing high power, and then they are representing low interest. If we go for this region, it's a high interest and then a high power. If we go for this region, then we are having it as high interest but low power. So if we go and see project team, you will see that the project team is having high interest, but they almost have no power or low power. So high interest, low power, we kept them here. High interest and low power. Are we clear? Are we fine? Going for the second. Now you can see the owner is having the power, and the owner is having the high interest. So high power, high interest. So the owner, of course, should be kept here, where it's high interest and high power. Are we clear about placing the stakeholders in the stakeholder matrix or power versus interest matrix? This is called as stakeholder matrix or power versus interest matrix. Are we okay? Supplier is having interest, is having high interest. He does not want to lose this project, but he does not have the power because he is replaceable. So we kept him here with the project team. So high but low power. Muscat municipality, they are having the high power. Okay, Muscat municipality is having high power, but they don't have high interest. Okay, so high power, but they don't have high interest. So if we go and place them, we'll see that they are going to be placed here, where it's high power but low interest. High power and low interest. Last is going to be neighbors where they don't have high power and they don't have high interest. Are we okay till now? Are we okay till now? Okay, so what we try to do, the first thing we try to know who are the possible stakeholders. Okay, and we said these stakeholders can be identified either by asking people in the industry, which are experts, or we can get them by brainstorming, mainly in construction. Now, after knowing these stakeholders, you will go and try to check whether they have the power and the interest. After knowing whether they have the power and the interest, which is the step that we have done, we are going to place them in the correct position. Okay, we are going to put them in the correct position according to the power and interest. Okay, in the power interest matrix. So based on whatever analysis that we have done for them according to the power and interest, we are going to place them in the correct position in the power versus interest matrix. After that, the last thing, that normally we have general solutions for each of these four. Okay, we have general solutions for each of these four categories. So the category of low interest, low power, the category of high power but low interest, the category of high power and high interest, the category of low power but high interest. So we have different solutions for each and every category. The first one, it says for the category of stakeholders who are having high power but low interest, the general solution is to keep them satisfied. Now, is it important for me to keep the Muscat municipality to be satisfied? Is it important? Is it important for me to keep Muscat municipality to be satisfied? Now, if they are not satisfied, what will happen? If they are not satisfied, they will stop my project. Okay? If they are not satisfied, they will stop my project. Okay? So the general solution for the stakeholders available in high power, low interest, that we need to keep them satisfied. Okay, we need to keep them satisfied. Now, do I need to keep the neighbor satisfied? Is it important for me to keep him satisfied? Do you think that I should satisfy the neighbor? No, the neighbor is not that important for me to keep him satisfied. Okay, so once again, why is it important for me to keep the stakeholders in the power versus interest matrix? Because later on you will know how to deal with them. So you can see here, I need to keep Muscat municipality satisfied. Okay, no, you don't need to keep your neighbor satisfied. Not maybe, you don't need to. Okay, do I need do I need to manage the owner closely? When I say manage closely, it means two things. I need to satisfy him and I need to tell him everything about the project. Do I need to tell him everything about the project? If I'm the project manager, now the project manager is doing this stakeholder analysis. Do I need to inform the owner everything happens in the project? Do I need to keep him satisfied? So two things once again. I need to inform him everything about the project and I need to make sure that he is satisfied. Okay. So once again, the group of stakeholders who are having high power and high interest, the general solution for them is to be managed closely. What does it mean? It means that they need to be informed whatever happens in the project, and they need to be satisfied about the project. The third category, okay, the third category, let us take first the high interest. The third category is said for you keep informed. Do you need to tell the team members what are the updates going on in the site or in the construction? Do I need to tell them, or it's not important? The people who are working in your site, do you need to keep them informed about the updates happening in the project, or it's not required? I need to inform them, right? I need to inform them all the updates which are there. Okay, all the updates which are there. The last category is monitoring. Okay, where we are only just checking if they will create for us any issues. Okay, we are just checking with them. Monitoring means only checking. We are checking whether they will be creating for us any issues or not. We are not doing anything for them. We are only monitoring. Do you want me to give you a small example which illustrates these little bit easier? Okay. Okay. Now let us say, okay, let us say, let us say that we are talking about the example of students and classes. Okay. So I have a course of project management. Now in this course of project management, there are two lecturers. So I was one of the lecturers, and then there was another lecturer. Okay. There are two lecturers. I was one, and you are my students, and there is a second one with his own students. Are we clear? Are we clear? Okay, very good. Now, when it comes to any update happening regarding a quiz, so I'm going to make a test for my section. I need to keep or I need to make a test for my section. Do I need to tell my students, or do I need to tell his students? My students, right? I need to tell my students, which are in this scenario representing the project team members, okay, which are representing the project team members. They are interested about whatever happens with the course with me. Okay. They are not that interested of whatever happens with the other section, with the other lecturer. Once again, a course which is having two lecturers. One is with me, the other one with another lecturer. Now I have my own students, and he has his own students. Okay. Now, which one I need to inform them about the quiz? I need to inform my students. Okay. So the project team members here, which are representing my students, They are having a lot of interest of whatever happens in my lecture because they are my students. But the other students which are from that particular lecturer, with that particular lecturer in that particular don't care a lot about, they don't have a lot of interest of whatever is going on in my section. Are we clear? So my students are having interest in whatever I'm telling them. So I need to keep them informed. I need to keep them informed of whatever happens in the course. Now for the other section, I'm not going to keep them informed, of course, but I'm going to monitor them. Means I'm going to check what they have finished exactly, how many chapters they have done. Is it clear? Is it clear now the difference between keep informed and monitor? Are we fine now? Okay. So it's very important. It's very important for you to know in which category you are. Okay. In which category you are. Are you in high power, high interest, or high power, low interest, or high interest, low power, or low power, low interest? Okay. So later on you will know the general actions or the general solutions. So if I asked you the general solution for a category of or for a stakeholder who is having high power, low interest, we should analyze and think that this is having high power, is having low interest, so I need to keep him satisfied. Otherwise, my project will stop. Stakeholder who is having high power, high interest, he needs to know everything about the project and he needs to be satisfied as well. So I need to manage him closely. People who are directly affected by the project, I'm going to keep informing them about the update because if anything happens in the project, they will be directly affected. People who are having almost no interest, no power, I'm just going to monitor them to check whether they will be creating for me any issues or not. Are we okay? Is it clear now the process of doing whatever we call it as stakeholder analysis? Is it clear? Whatever we call it as stakeholder analysis. Okay. Now for stakeholder analysis, if you remember, in the previous chapter of initiation, we said first we need to identify the key stakeholders, the most important stakeholders. So the project manager will know them. The next step for the project manager is to identify all the stakeholders, checking who is having more input, who is having more power, who is having more interest, and later on he will create whatever we call it as power versus interest matrix. Okay. Now after finishing the stakeholder planning, so we planned for the stakeholder. Now we know that this stakeholder is going to have this particular solution. This is what we mean by planning for stakeholders. After that, we are going to plan for risks. Now, if this particular risk happens, then what should I do? Okay. So at that time, whenever that risk happens, I should have already a plan with me that if this risk happens, then this is the solution. Okay. So we'll come here and we'll know how to plan for risks. Once again, we are going to have the same example. Okay. The same example of identification. But now instead of identifying the stakeholders, we are going to try to identify the risks. Okay, so we are identifying and analyzing the possible risks for the construction of a building. Now there will be many risks once again. Okay, there will be many risks once again, but we'll try to identify them. So when we see here, when we see what are the steps involved with the risk planning, they are going to be risk identification, something similar to stakeholder identification. The first process in stakeholder planning was stakeholder identification. After that, we had whatever we call stakeholder analysis, in which we checked what stakeholders are having power, what stakeholders are having interest. In this scenario, we are going to do a risk analysis. After risk analysis, we are going to have risk responses, or whatever we call it as stakeholder groups action, or whatever we call the solutions. You remember the manage closely and what you call keep satisfied and the others. Do you remember them? These are responses. These are your actions. Okay? So first is identification, knowing the risks or knowing the stakeholders. After that, analyzing them, and then finding a proper solution. Are we okay? And finally, we'll come up to the risk register later on. But the main steps which are there in risk is starting by knowing the risks. So risk identification. After that, we are doing a risk analysis, because there will be many risks, but we should know which risk is more important and which risk is less important. After that, we are going to have something called risk responses, where we are providing solutions for that particular risk. Is the process clear? So we'll start with the example. Is this process clear? That we should do the identification, after that analyzing them, after that finding a solution. Okay. So identification sources, something similar to stakeholder analysis. From where did you do the identification for the stakeholders? Once again, when it comes to the risk, the first thing that normally we do, is to review the project documents, and here we refer to the contract. Okay. Here we refer to the contract. Okay. So first thing, to know what are the possible risks. Okay, to know what are the possible risks, I need to review the contract. Second thing, we need to have a checklist and lessons learned from the previous project. So the second source of risks is going to be the previous project. So when some risks can be identified from the contract itself, some risks can be identified from similar previous projects. Okay, some risks are going to be obtained from interviewing, brainstorming, or Delphi technique. Some risks are going to be obtained from whatever we call it as SWOT analysis, that is strength, weakness, opportunities, and threat analysis. Okay. Now, the contract, I think, is very clear. Okay, the contract is very clear. Like, for example, if we talk about I started construction of a villa, but before the starting of a construction of a villa, there was a contract between me as a contractor and an owner. Okay, and in that contract, nothing has been mentioned related to the soil of that particular area. Once again, there is a contract between the contractor and then the owner. Okay, stating of whatever that we need to do. Now, in the contract, nothing has been mentioned related to the soil of that particular area. Now, do you think that the soil will create for you certain issues? Is it possible? Is it possible that soil will create for you some issues? Like, for example, there is a high water table, that particular plot, whenever we excavate, some water will come. Is there chances? Okay. Are there any chances? Are there any chances that this particular plot is having weak soil? So there are certain things which can be identified from the contract. Now the contract didn't say anything related to the soil. So it means there are certain risks which are related to soil which needs to be identified. Are we clear? Do you want an example? Okay. I'll give you an example, but not from construction. Let's say that for example, I told you that next week is going to be we had an agreement that next week Sunday is going to be your test. Okay. Next week Sunday is going to be your test. Okay. But I didn't give you any information regarding that particular test. Okay. I didn't give you any information about that particular test, only that this test is going to be for half an hour. Okay. I didn't specify for you the number of questions. I didn't specify for you the type of questions. Now, when I told you that by having this agreement, now the first thing you will try to identify. Now, he didn't tell me any type of questions will be coming. It means that one of the risks that anything can come. We might be having multiple choice question. We might be having open question. We might be having short question. We might be having, for example, something to write. Are we clear? So when we talk about review project documents, we review the agreement. If the agreement was very clear, it means that risks are not what you call, or risks have been already solved. Not solved, but let's say have been addressed already. Okay. Now, if things are not very clear, while reviewing the document or while reviewing the contract or the agreement, like the test example, you can try to identify what are the possible risks that you might be having while doing this particular test or this particular project. Are you okay? Are we okay? Okay. Now, so we took the example. Okay, we took the example of the previous. We took the example of the previous, or we took the example of the test. Okay, let us continue with the test. Now, so you knew, or you tried to analyze. You said, okay. Now he didn't tell us about the type of questions. He didn't tell us about the number of questions. So there are certain risks related to that. Okay. Now, can I return back to the previous examination where I can see what are the other risks? Can I return back to the previous projects or the previous tests to check what are the risks? That maybe time is not sufficient. That maybe his questions are not clear. That maybe his questions are very difficult. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do normally? First, we review the documents or the agreement between the two. Second, we return back to the previous project to check what are the things happening normally. So one of the things happened, maybe time was less. It means that I need to finish very quick. Otherwise, I'll not finish. Are we clear? Are we okay? Okay. Now, if you didn't find, okay, if you didn't find previous exams, what will you do? So we said first we'll check the agreement. whatever we have got from him. Second, we'll go and check the previous exams. If the previous exams are not there, what will you do? Can I go and ask the people who have finished the course previously? Can I do some kind of interviewing? Is it clear now? No need, once again, I told you, you are not required to go and think of a very huge project to understand whatever we are talking about. Okay? So try to think of things which are easy to understand. Okay. So we return back to the interviews. Okay. Now, if we couldn't manage to do the interviewing, then normally we do brainstorming. Okay. Then we do brainstorming. Brainstorming means that we are thinking together. Okay? We are thinking together. In interviewing, normally I'm a person who is doing the interview, but I don't help in answering anything. I'm not the one to answer. I'm not the one to identify, because I'm doing the interviewing only. I'm the one who is doing the interview. In brainstorming, I'm involved in the process of trying to identify these risks. Okay, so if you couldn't get previous exams, if you didn't manage to find people who have finished the course with me, for example, then the other thing, you will sit together and try to think what are the possible problems or what are the possible issues might be coming for us. So we had with him 5 or 4 pop-up quizzes. We can see that the time is not sufficient, for example. Or we had an issue that the internet keeps disconnected. Or we had this issue, or we had that issue. Are we clear? Are we fine? Okay. So first, we need to review the documents, check the previous exams or the previous projects, trying to do interviewing, if not possible, brainstorming. If not possible, we are going to go for something called Delphi technique. Now, Delphi technique is something similar to a questionnaire. Now, the main idea when you do the questionnaire, normally you don't know the persons who are replying to your questions, right? Now, interviewing, do you know the person I mean, or to whom you are doing the interview? Do you know the person whom you are interviewing? In interviewing, do you know the person whom you are interviewing? Do you know him? Is it necessary? Or you will go without knowing the person you will interview? Of course, I'll interview a person whom I'll know. Now, in brainstorming, when you do the brainstorming, normally you will know the people who are with you. So when we talk about interviewing and when we talk about the brainstorming, you will know that these are the people who have been involved in this step. Are we clear? Okay. Now, when it comes to Delphi technique, in Delphi technique, you are getting the responses without knowing from where they came. So, for example, I made one questionnaire and I have sent it to all the civil students, civil graduates, all the architectural engineering students, graduates. I asked them what are the issues normally happening with the course of project management. Now, true that I have given it, but I don't know who will respond and who is not. In Delphi technique, it is a method in which we are getting the responses or we are trying to identify but without knowing the sources. Are we clear? Are we fine? Okay. The last one, the last of the identification methods is whatever we call it as strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. Okay. Strength, weakness, opportunities, threats. I think you have studied this one in one of the business courses, I believe, right? Did you study the SWOT analysis? Did you take the SWOT analysis in one of the business courses? Okay. So from the SWOT analysis, when you will do the strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, you should know what are the things can create for you a risk, and this is going to be one of the identification methods. Okay, so always your concentration is going to be to weakness and threats, which will open for you the negative risks, and then opportunities will open for you the positive risks. Okay. Now, when it comes to reality and construction, normally we are having review documents, previous projects, interviewing or brainstorming only. First thing, we go to project documents or the contract or the agreement. Second thing, we return back to the previous project, the records from the previous project, the reports. After that, we'll go to do the interviews. If the first two are not clear, the last option is going to go for brainstorming. That's normally in construction. In business and whatever, in the business and other fields, you can use Delphi technique and SWOT analysis. Are we clear? Are we clear about these four categories or these four sources of identification? Once again, now what we are trying to say, that risks can be coming from any of these four. But normally in construction, we have reviewing the documents, previous project. That's the biggest source. The biggest source normally of identifying risks is a previous project. And then we have interviewing and brainstorming. So now, another one is root cause analysis, where you are trying to see the root cause, what is the main cause of that particular previous issue, which is very, very similar to the previous project. Okay, which is very, very similar to the previous project. And once again, this is normally not used in construction. Okay, root cause analysis is not used in construction. Okay. So I have tried to identify what are the Iram, it depends. If you feel that reviewing the documents checklists are sufficient, you have already identified sufficient number of risks, then it's fine. You don't need to go for the other methods. The main source of identifying the risks is going to be the checklist or the previous project, whatever we refer as previous project. If you could manage to identify all the possible risks according to you in the previous project, then that's fine. Okay. So once again, previous project plus reviewing the documents. Now I have tried to see the previous projects, for example, and one of the main risks that I have observed is late approval. Now normally one of the biggest risks is normally late approvals. If the owner didn't approve in the correct time, if the municipality didn't approve in the meantime, will I have any risk? Will I have any risk if the owner didn't approve in the correct time? If the municipality didn't approve in the specified time, do I have risks? Okay, I'll have a lot of risks, right? Okay, I'll have a lot of risks, time, money, a lot of things are involved. Okay, the other one, subsurface conditions. This is where we talked about soil. Okay, a lot of issues are happening here in Oman. A lot of cracks are happening, mainly because we are not doing soil investigation report. Okay, so one of the risks is subsurface condition, which is referred to soil conditions. Are we fine? So once again, these are examples of me trying to identify the risks. Higher delays. Do you think that it's a risk? Do you think that supplier delays is a risk? Insufficient funds. Insufficient funds means the chances of the owner not having sufficient money. Do you think that it will cause you a problem if the owner is not having sufficient money? Will it cause you a problem? Okay. Change orders. Anybody knows what's the meaning of variation or change orders? Anybody came across this word? Change orders or variation? What is the meaning of variation or change order? This is the biggest issue that we are suffering from in Oman. The biggest issue that we are suffering in Oman is whatever we call variation or change orders. Okay. Now to keep it very clear, when we talk about change orders or variation, normally there will be a contract between the owner and the contractor. Okay. There is a contract between the owner. Okay. There is a contract between the owner and the contractor, and both of them they sign on this particular contract. Now, any changes before signing the contract is fine. Any changes before signing the contract from both parties is fine, because accordingly the contract value will change. But if you ask for any changes after the contract has been signed, you need to get the approval from the second side, which is the contractor. Once again, if I still didn't sign the contract, I can change anything that they want. You are having the power. Now the change order, the change you are requesting has been or has happened after the contract has been signed. Okay. Now, if it comes to the point where the contract has been already signed and you are asking for a change, now you don't have the power. The power with somebody else. Are we clear? And a very good example, the building of Ministry of Education. I keep giving this particular example each and every semester. Now, if you remember, the building of Ministry of Education has took a lot of time, and the budget kept for that project maybe has increased more than 6 or 7 times the initial budget. Why? Because of the changes which were asked by the ministry. In the initial design, there was no dome. Later on, there was a dome. In the initial design, the color was different. And then after that, the color to be changed. So when you keep on asking a lot of changes, there will be a lot of issues in terms of time. There will be huge issues in terms of money. Are we clear? You go and read about the building of Ministry of Education and see how much was the initial quote or how much was the initial price and how much was the last one or the final one. And you see how many change orders or variations have happened over there. Okay. The last thing that I have identified is external risks. Now, external risks are anything beyond your scope. You cannot control it. Okay? Beyond your control or beyond your scope. Now, can I control, for example, rain? Can I control rain, that rain will not come to my site? Or can I control that coronavirus will not come to my site? Is it something controllable or it cannot be controlled? Now, if anything cannot be controlled, we call it as external risks. Okay? If anything cannot be controlled, we call it as external risks. Okay. Now, what I have tried to do, I have used the previous methods, the previous projects, interviews, brainstorming, and we try to identify the risks. And accordingly, I have identified 6 risks. I have identified 6 risks only. Now, after I have done the identification, I'm going to go for risk analysis. Now, in risk analysis, these are the 6 identified. These are the 6 identified risks. Next step is to go and do the risk valuing. We have something called P, that is representing the probability. How many times will it occur? Or how many times is expected to occur? What are the chances? 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and it goes on. So probability is referring to the chances. And then we have impact. Now, if this is happening 20%, how much will it impact me or how much it will be affecting me? Probability is referring to the chances. I is referring to impact. If we multiply these two, then we have our risk value. Okay. So if we try to define risk, we'll say the chances of any activity affecting my project negatively or positively. Once again, P is representing the chances, I is representing the impact or the effect. So to define risk, we can say the chances of any task impacting my or affecting my project negatively or positively. Are we fine? Are we fine? Okay. Now, if the probability, if the chances are zero, then will the risk happens? If the chances are zero, will the risk happen? If the risk or if the chances are zero, it means that the risk value is going to be zero. Okay, I'll give you an I'll give you an example where the impact can be zero or the probability can be zero. Okay. Now, my project was traveling from Muscat to Salalah. Okay, my project was traveling from Muscat to Salalah. One of the risks that normally there are a lot of car accidents. Okay? One of the risks that there are car accidents. Do you agree with me? My project was to drive from Muscat to Salalah. One of the biggest risks is car accidents in the road. Do you agree with me? Okay, so I have identified one of the risks, that is car accidents. Okay. Now, if I take the car from Muscat to Salalah, then there is a chance of that to happen. So the chances are more than 0. Are we okay? That the chances are more than 0 if we take a car from Muscat to Salalah. Okay. Now, if the second scenario, instead of taking the car, I took the plane. If I took the plane from Muscat to Salalah, is there any chance of having a car accident? Are we clear now about the probability and the impact? Are we clear? So would you have the risk of having any car accidents if you are moving from Muscat to Salalah by airplane? So if the probability is 0, it means that the risk eventually is 0. If the impact is 0, it means that the risk is 0 as well. Are we clear? Are we clear about this point? Okay. Now, the next step actually is to give values for the probability and impact. Okay, to give values for the probability and impact. If we go and see here, we'll see, for example, now I have given the probability, the chances of late approvals to happen is around 40%. So I have given it 2 out of 5. Okay, 2 out of 5. We're going to use matrix of 5 into 5. There is a matrix of 4 into 4. There is a matrix of 3 out of 3, or 3 into 3. So here I'm going to use later on matrix of 5 into 5. So you will give your percentage to be out of 5. So this is going to be 2 out of 5. It means that it's 40%. So there is 40% chances of late approvals. If late approvals happens, then it will impact me. How much it will impact you? It will impact me severely. So it's going to be 4 out of 5. And once again, these values are approximated or suggested by a person who is having the experience to judge. Are we clear? So in your exam, I'll not be asking you to estimate how much is the probability and impact. That's above your level right now. You need already some experience, some some real knowledge about the project to judge how much is the probability and impact. Are we clear? Whatever I'm trying to do, I'm trying to give you the highlight of the process. So later on, when you will go and start working, these values of probability and impact will be given by a senior engineer, and then you will be able to do the remaining part of the job. Are we clear? I have already told you that in the exams, only definite questions will be coming, right? I have already illustrated that. Okay, so the same thing that we are going to do for each and every risk. Anyhow, I'll not talk about it a lot now since there is no time. If we started, we might be requiring more than uh, 10 minutes. So we are going to stop here. Okay. We are going to stop here, and we are going to continue whatever we have finished today. We are going to continue it in the upcoming lecture. If you have any question, then you are free to ask. If you are not, then your question is available in e-learning or to be answered. If you have any question, you can ask. If not, Your pop-up question is available in the e-learning. Now, regarding the pop-up question, a lot of talk is happening regarding that, whether it's attendance, whether we should be getting the full mark or not. We received an email, but that email for me is still not that clear. Eventually, everything is recorded. Okay? So if they say that these marks are only for attendance, for the sake of attendance, whether your answer is correct or your answer is wrong, you will be getting the mark. Okay? But till we confirm that point, I cannot decide on it. Anyhow, once again, go to your pop-up quiz and try to answer it.